Bugging out. That's one thing that a lot of people, when they associate survival, grid down, SHTF, they're going to bug out. Really, bugging out should be a last resort. You're a glorified refugee. You're vulnerable. You're out there in the elements. Or you're in a vehicle and you're in gridlock traffic. Can't go anywhere. Really, your supplies are at home. The people you know, your neighbors, you know the property, and that's a place you're supposed to be. But there needs to be a plan to bug out in case things are compromised, which can happen. Criminal elements, even your neighbors ganging up against you, a house fire during an SHTF situation, it just may require you to leave your home. And you should have supplies set aside, ready to go in case that happens. Now, most people, when they're asked, where are you going to go? What's your bug out plan? And a lot of people, their answer is, we're going to head out in the woods. We're going to go up to the hills. We're going to go to the mountains. One thing about that is you're going to have a really difficult time surviving long term. Yes, for maybe 3 days, possibly, you might be able to live out in the woods. But really, unless you really know what you're doing, it's going to be a very big challenge, mainly gathering food. So we're going to go through about 10 different things. First couple should be pretty much just normal. Everybody thinks about it. The following 8 are going to be ideas if you're out there and you're traveling on foot or even in a vehicle. What are some places to look for to be able to have some shelter and some security? Now, before we get into that, I want to talk about law enforcement. And guys, one of the things that happened down in Argentina when they had their complete economic collapse was that the police were not there to save you, but they were there to arrest you. And even in a grid down situation, law enforcement is going to be around. There's going to be some form of government happening. And so you've got to be careful. You want to stay in the law as much as possible. And you don't want to go to jail. You don't want to go into areas that are no trespassing where you could get shot. And you just need to do the right thing. Survival is important, but doing the right thing is really where we should be. Now, first off, of course, is where you're going to go. Now, if you have a retreat, if you have a bug out retreat, a location, a cabin way up in the woods on some property, obviously that's a great place to go. One of the problems with that is getting there. Again, gridlock traffic, running out of gas, whatever reason, you may not be able to get to that location. And also, your second choice would be family or friends. In fact, honestly, I think that's a really good choice because you're with people you know, that you love, that you care about, and really working together in numbers is going to give you a lot of advantages, not only with security, but also just with the hard work that it takes to survive and do the preparation that goes around that. And so those two are what a lot of people kind of plan on. It's one of the things that I've always recommended is at least have a destination to where you're going. Don't just head out on the road and just hope for the best. You need to really make a plan before you step out. So number 3 on the list is campgrounds. There are a lot of campgrounds all across the country. Even if you're traveling to see family or friends or retreat, it may be an overnight event. And so finding a campground is an excellent choice because you can pay to be there. You could possibly have utilities, have a bathroom, even, a place to take a shower. And so having a campground gives you a lot of options. Taking a tent and just setting it up, or if you have a vehicle large enough, or camper, where you can stop and you can take time to gather your thoughts. It may be an extended period of time that you need to stay at that campground. And so campgrounds to me are really a great choice. Next is just friends' property. Not necessarily their house, but just say, hey, we need a place. Can we stay in an old shed you have out back? Do you have a lake house? Even a hunting cabin or something on the property, even a lean-to or a pole barn, something that we can get under to have shelter, and yet, we're in a friendlier environment. And also you can help with their chores and help with security around their area. And so having family and friends that have property and to have a place is also, a great choice and something that really is optimal. National or state parks. One of the phenomena that's been happening is a lot of homeless people are moving into national parks. We've lived next to a national park for many years when we were up in North Carolina. And so we know a lot of people there, and they said that's one of the things that's happening up in the national forest is a lot of homeless people are going up into the forest, and they're making little communities. They're setting up tents. They're sleeping up in the forest. Kind of gets them away from a lot of law enforcement and a lot of trouble, and it kind of gives them a place to go where they can be. Obviously, you want to be careful, and there are state park rangers, there's game wardens. Again, you want to stay legal. Try to stay in those areas that are allotted for people to be at. And guys, we've camped in the National Forest for years, and so it is a place that you can go, very similar to a campground, but more primitive camping. But it is a great place, and it's one of those places that if you go there, you can be legitimately there. Now, one of the other sides and a downside to a national park or a state park is a lot of times there's a lot of nefarious activity that goes on in those places. So you want to have your guard up, you want to be careful. But to me, it's just a great place, it's a public place, and it's somewhere that you can somewhat feel safe. Now, shelters set up like Red Cross, definitely like FEMA. You want to be careful before you go and sign into something. Make sure that you have access in and out. But, different kind of camps that are set up more like a refugee camp. Again, guys, you're bugging out. You are a glorified refugee, and that may be the area that you need to go to. A lot of times they will serve food, and they even have some shelters, or they'll have tents set up. That would not be one of my first choices, but if it just came down to that, that might be a location that you could go, at least for a temporary period. But again, there could be some downsides, especially when FEMA gets involved. And there's a lot of good things that they do. So I'm not going to throw them all under the bus, but I would just be careful in those kind of locations that you have access in and out without any trouble. So honestly, I would prefer Red Cross. Also homeless shelters, but they're going to be filled up. I mean, that is one of the problems. Now, the next 5 are places that you may come across, that you may know about, that you don't necessarily have permission, but you can at least go and hide out. There's probably not anybody that's monitoring those areas. And one of those would just be an old barn. A barn that's been sitting out that nobody really uses anymore. I would be careful though, because the structure may not be sound, and you don't want to have something caving in on you. But a lot of these old barns they sit up for years, and people just don't use them because it's just too much trouble to tear down. And so you may be able to find something like that that's a shelter, and that's really what you're looking for, is something to keep you out of the rain and the elements, give you a little bit of security. Now, also, you may come across a hunting cabin. Now, one of the problems with the hunting cabin is there may be other people that are thinking the same thing, and they're going to that hunting cabin. But those are places you might come across that you can, bed down for a few days, kind of hide out. But the main goal here is just having some shelter. Now, one thing that I think is probably a good choice is utility easements. You know how you see the power lines, and there's a big, wide area that goes across. They keep it kind of cut back. And so there's a lot of area there to be able to set up a tent, typically just right outside of that area where there's typically woods. And so you're still on some kind of public property, even though it's utility property. It's not going to be monitored as much as other places. One of the things that I love about it, whether it's power lines or pipelines, is that it goes in a certain direction, and it kind of gives you a way to be able to move through that area in kind of a general direction, wherever you're going. But that may be because, again, it's not monitored, and really, if you're there, they may just ask you to leave. But you're not necessarily going to get shot. And that is one thing that you need to be mindful of, especially with some of these places. When you're on somebody else's property, you're trespassing. So you need to be careful. Abandoned industrial sites. A lot of times companies come and go. Big industrial sites, it's a big manufacturing facility. And at one point they were thriving, and then maybe the business moved to overseas. And so you have these big, huge abandoned buildings. I really kind of like that situation because they usually have a lot of places to conceal yourself and a lot of little rooms in different places. And so it makes it a little bit easier to be able to kind of stay low key. Typically, these aren't places that somebody would go and loot what was in it because there's really probably nothing of much value. But it gives you a place to be able to be secure, kind of keeps you out of the elements, and you can stay hidden because typically those buildings are really large. And there may even be other people staying there, but it's big enough to where you can have your own space. Next is commercial buildings or even office parks. A lot of times they're kind of out a little bit and there's a lot of area around them, and you may be able to find some place there where you can shelter down. Even if it's just a lean-to or an awning, over a door, and you can kind of camp out there. Obviously, if you're in bug out, there's going to be a national emergency. There's things going on, and so people may or may not be at work. One thing you want to be mindful of. But as far as having some kind of security or cameras and watching for those, watching for cameras that are around, watching for different, maybe just part-time security that's coming and maintaining the place. And that way you can have a place that's kind of private and you can have a little bit of shelter and kind of out of the way, because usually those places are very large. Now, number 10 on the list is just abandoned structures. And a lot of times, there's mobile homes, and I've seen them around where they're brought into a lot and they're just sitting there. It's a place to be able to get into and to sleep in, if nothing else. Again, just to get out of the shelter. It's not going to be a super nice, 5-star hotel, but it's definitely going to be better than being out just in the woods or in the grass. And so sometimes you can find these places around. There's a lot of abandoned houses. Now sometimes they're older, and just like the abandoned barns, they can have some structural issues. So you want to be careful, but it does give you a place, again, to get out of the wind and the rain and snow and whatever else you're facing during that time. And a lot of times people aren't even paying attention to those places. One thing that's kind of unusual, but really more toward the western part of the country, is ghost towns. A lot of times small settlements would pop up and people would live there, and for different reasons those towns were just abandoned. And so that might be a great choice, but typically they're out far away. But you can find buildings like that even in urban areas. The problem is a lot of times the homeless find those places, and people that are drug abusers, things like that. So you could find yourself in a not so friendly environment. But with all these places, you need to use your judgment and you need to think things through before you come in. Give it a good evaluation before you move into the area. Whether it's a hunting cabin, whether it's an industrial site, walk around it, check out, look, see what's going on, and before you just walk up to these places, because there could be people already there. Again, there could be security, there could be law enforcement monitoring those places, and so you want to make sure that you have a good plan. Now, one of the big things about this whole list, guys, is that you need to be looking now, thinking about different places. If you're already planning a bug out, think about the places that you're going through. It may be 2 states away, and so you need to have some ideas as you go along. If nothing else, find out where the camping areas are all along the way. When you're going, the next time you're going to family and friends, look to the sides of the roads and see if there's any kind of abandoned buildings or places that would be great for bug out. A big industrial area that's been abandoned. We have family in Chattanooga, and a lot of times there are a number of different big industrial buildings that are just abandoned. And so if that's what it takes, it'd be great to have shelter. The big thing, guys, is having shelter, having a place to get rest. You want to make sure that you have the gear you need to be able to stay for a number of days. And of course, one of the things that's going to keep you on the move is food. And if you can't find food, that's going to be a problem. Or water. And so making sure that you have some things set aside. But even if you're in your vehicle and you're on the road, finding a good little location to hide out at night would be a good choice. So guys, again, just make a plan, get yourself in good shape, think about it ahead of time, and it'll help you to not make rash decisions, but to make decisions on good judgment. Because the more you have ahead and the more you planned ahead, the better off you're going to be. And guys, if you can think of other bug out locations that would be suitable, leave them down in the comments below. It's great for the community to be able to look and read those comments, interact. And guys, I'll tell you, bugging out is a last resort. It should be the end of the road when you hit the road. But you need to have a bug out plan. And just because you have a bug out bag and you're going to head to the woods, it really lessens your chance of survival. But finding a good shelter will really put you in a much better place. Guys, when it comes to fire, it is essential to survival, and having a good fire kit and knowing how to use it is vital for survival situations. And Exotac makes the best fire starters on the market. Made in the USA, down in Winder, Georgia, using really high-grade aluminum, they machine some really beautiful handles, a lot of different features, replaceable ferro rods, and a number of other different fire starting tools. You get 20% off using Sootch 20 with the link down below in the description. And a big thank you to Exotac for sponsoring today's video. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. But today we're going to talk about a couple of the places that, most people do know where they would go.